what does it mean to relate to someone else?
Have things in common.
Okay.
That you can relate with.
Mm-hmm. It's easier to relate with certain people than it is with others. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. I did the same deal and looked up another definition just to see, to understand how another feels or behaves so you are able to communicate or deal with them easily. And in some cases, that's far easier than others. Sometimes we have to work a lot harder to find something in common or to see past certain things in order to be able to relate. Relating is the medium through which we do relationship, right? It's the channels of communication, the antenna of what we pick up and perceive. So, in thinking about how we relate, how do we learn to relate? When does that start? Pardon?
From birth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the very beginning.
Mother, child,
Yeah, so
mother's voice.
so even down to the basic. I'm sorry.
Like even in the womb.
Yeah.
Babies respond to voices.
So we're getting that kind of input, that kind of stimulation, and babies often know their mother's voice, before they're born, but certainly by the time they're born, based on even that very early interaction. What about kind of moving on from infancy on up? How else do we learn to relate?
Through our interactions with people around, kind of, especially school. Did you know we're in school basically most of our beginning lives? So I think friendships is a big thing. As far as friends go, I think that's part of it.
Yeah, from preschool on through elementary school, high school, that we're learning and developing how to relate. It starts out pretty basic. As an infant, you just sort of cry and you get what you want. And we have to sort of gradually develop better ways of figuring out how to ask for what we want to need, because unfortunately that doesn't last us too long. So if I started screaming right now, nobody would really quite know what to do. Probably I wouldn't get what I needed. So yeah, we're constantly developing and refining how we relate, learning from experiences, learning from exposure to other people, from the examples of how to be or how not to be that we might see from people. When do we stop learning to relate?
We do. The more we know people or a person, the more we get to know we can relate more with that person.
Mm-hmm. So it's a
continuous.
Lifelong, ongoing process, yeah. Hopefully we don't ever stop learning. What kinds of things impact how we, what kinds of specific life events or interactions impact how we start to develop our relational map or how it is that we do relating?
I think some of that's the things we go through, just because, especially preschool, you have your friends, and you don't know how to really make connections. Very, very, I guess, intimate connections. You just kind of, go to school, you see your friends, circle time, all that stuff, show and tell. And then you get to junior high. And then in junior high is when you kind of need like a connection. You kind of need something to hold on to. So I think that's when we kind of hit that wall, that's when we start to really develop intimate relationships. I mean, maybe before that, but I think junior high is kind of I need love, I need something to kind of fill that gap that I feel.
And junior high is kind of a crucible, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's when we're the nastiest to each other. Well, not necessarily, but definitely very nasty to one another. If you don't have the right clothes or the right, if you're not involved in the right things, you really can feel very outcast or very, very disconnected, very alone. But as you said, circle time and those interactions that sort of build upon one another as you go, are all very important. What other kinds of experiences besides social ones come to mind?
Like your background and kind of, not necessarily culture, but how you were brought up in your house. Like maybe if your parents treated you a certain way, and then you would maybe kind of have the tendency to not sort of lash out, but act that way towards others.
Mm-hmm. yeah, your broader culture, but even the culture of your family and your household, and the way that people operate, the way that people act, are going to shape your template for how you're supposed to parent, or how you're supposed to do any of those things. And family has the tendency to be one of the bigger shaping factors, but for some people that's really great, for other people it's not. And so it's a good thing that family's not the only one, because that could leave some of us in a real bad place if that were the case. Again, it's so different from one individual to the next, which I think is why it's difficult to have one set sort of guideline for how a relationship's supposed to go, and what's gonna feel right and helpful for a particular person. Well, so how do we relate differently in different relationships? We've talked about all these different kinds of relationships, all these different ways that we develop how we relate, but do we relate exactly the same way in each instance or with each person in our lives?
No, because as you said before, each individual is different, and they come from different backgrounds, so we kind of have to accommodate, or maybe that's not the right word, but we have to kind of, work our way around trying to figure out where we're going to mesh together. And in that, I think, is where the difficult part comes, and the patience comes. So
how to adapt
Yeah.
from one relationship to the next, or one type of relationship to the next, or what you hope for, what you want.
I think a lot of the difference comes from the motives we have for having different relationships. Like, where some we have the relationship because we're getting something out of it, whereas others we're just there because we have love for them and we want to give it to them.
Yeah, is there an agenda? Is it a work relationship, for example, where you're working together towards something? Is it a relationship where you are manipulating somebody else for something you want, or is it a relationship just for its own sake, where the connection is the goal, and the love or the intimacy that you can have is an endless goal, but it's not one that's toward anything else specific.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you think, as far as healthy relationships go, do you think that the last one you just said is probably one of the most healthy choices to kind of look forward to, as far as the intimacy in a relationship, just to kind of have kind of I know each relationship is different, but as far as intimate relationships and kind of working towards, there's really no goal, there's just kind of this intimacy and wanting to love one another, and kind of just no giving up. Giving up is kind of not an option as far as like any relationship I'm talking about. So I guess my question is, as far as healthy relationships go, is intimacy, endless intimacy, is that kind of the healthy way to go about it?
Well, I think, again, it depends on what type of relationship it is. You might not want to have and invest yourself in that way with a relationship that's going to be time limited, or that's going to expose you to vulnerabilities that maybe are not what you're looking for. If it's a work relationship, and you're only working someplace for so long. There's friendships within work relationships, but if it's just the business part of that, well, intimacy might not be, for its own sake, your goal. But in terms of your family relationships, your important people in your life, I think the ideal that we strive for is what you're talking about, that which actually is kind of where I was going to go next, is just what is the ultimate healthy relationship? Too often we start out with, it's really easy to identify what's unhealthy and what we don't want to have happen, but what's the mark of a really healthy relationship? Whether again it's dating or other kinds of close relationships, intimate relationships.
I think communication is very important, and to be able to not really study the person, but give time to that relationship and observe the way they act. If they have a problem or something, it's not really what problem they have, it's how they deal with the problem. And that's the way you can know better that person and develop a better, a healthier relationship, knowing the person at its full